Before a single brick is laid, landlords and real estate developers spend more than 40% of development costs on regulation. And also, I'll be responding to a comment from one of my viewers who thinks that there should be a limit on the number of properties a landlord can buy. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting video for you today, and I'm going to be going over a couple of very interesting topics. There are things that I cover in a lot of my videos, okay? The fact that government regulation is one of the biggest drivers of the affordable housing crisis, okay? A lot of people, they don't believe me when I say that. Well, I have an article today that actually goes over those costs for multifamily development and proves the fact that, hey, guess what? All that bureaucracy is the reason that housing is so expensive right now. But I also go over one of my commenters who seems to think that there should be a limit on the number of properties that a landlord can own. So before I get into the articles, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. What do you think of there being a limit on the number of properties that a landlord can own? Now, I know that the commenter, when they left that comment, they were targeting like these big mega corporations. But let me just say this right now. I know a lot of individual landlords. I know some individual landlords who own hundreds of units. Okay? It's not just giant mega corporations. Sometimes there are smaller landlords who own, just a few here and there. And yeah, I don't have a huge portfolio, but I completely understand that, hey, when you're building your business up, there's going to be different sizes of the players out there. And when it comes to the corporate landlords even, right? The things that affect them affect us. So when you put these laws and rules and regulations in place to try to go after those big corporate landlords, guess who gets the real pain and suffering? Me, a small landlord. That's why I don't like all that ridiculous legislation, all those ridiculous rules. Anyway, let's get into my first article. So it's coming from globestreet.com, and it says, regulations account for 40% of multifamily development costs. Yeah, and that's obvious, okay? Any landlord, any real estate developer, any real estate investor out there knows that all these regulations and everything are what's driving up the cost, especially in some of these far left leaning, very large cities like New York and in places like California, okay? They have so many rules, so many regulations. And then they sit there and they wonder, well, we put all these rules and regulations in place to try to keep housing costs low, but they just kept going up and they went up even higher. Well, hey, you're creating the problem yourself. Anyway, let's get into this article and see what it says. Government-imposed regulations account for more than 40% of all multifamily development costs, according to new research by the National Association of Home Builders and the National Multifamily Housing Council. And some of these regulatory mandates can discourage developers from building in the very marketplaces that have the greatest need for more housing, the entities write in a new report breaking down the data. This can prove to be particularly burdensome in a world of rising costs. Nearly 48% of multifamily developers said they avoid building in jurisdictions with policies like inclusionary zoning, and a whopping 87.5% will avoid building in a jurisdiction with rent control in place. Typically, when inclusionary zoning is at play, a density bonus is provided to developers to allow them to include more units than would normally be permitted by zoning. But according to NAHB/NMHC, these incentives are often inadequate and do not fully cover the lost rental revenue. Yeah, so when they create these policies, they created all these policies to help encourage development, right? Well, the problem is, like they said right there, they're inadequate. There's not enough incentive for the grand majority of developers to even bother with all these policies because there's so much regulation to them, okay? They just want to go out there, the best thing that a developer could do is just go out there and just be allowed to build. They don't want to have to jump through 1,000 hoops. They don't want to have to pay, tons of permit fees and jump through all these extra super special inspections and then, go all this ridiculous environmental garbage. It is ridiculous, okay? And they are discouraging landlords, real estate developers, multifamily housing providers from even wanting to do business in these places. So when you look at LA and they're talking about, hey, you know, we've got this rent control, but it's not impeding development. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And all you would have to do is actually talk to the developers, talk to the people who actually invest in these areas, and you would know this. But they don't. Instead, they go talk to activists or they talk to politicians, you know, the people who have no skin in the game, who don't actually have to do anything or put up their own money. And then, you know, they're just left there like, well, what happened? What happened? Well, that's exactly what happened. The people who are actually putting their money, you know, into these developments decided, hey, we're not developing here. In those cases, developers are forced to raise rents on the unrestricted apartments to fill the gap or to abandon the project altogether because it is no longer financially feasible, they note. These mandates were present in slightly over 1/3 of respondents' typical projects, and when present, they made up an average of 6.9% of total development costs. Respondents subject to inclusionary zoning report having to raise rents by an average of 7.6%. And I believe the inclusionary zoning thing is where, you know, they say, well, if you want to, you know, build market rate units, 30% of them, or, you know, some percentage of them have to be affordable to the area. So basically, you have to create subsidized units so that you can build the market rate ones. Well, that makes it very difficult for a landlord or developer to make a profit off of this property. So the only way they can do it is by blasting the rents through the roof for the ones that aren't under the affordable housing guidelines, you know, or they just say, hey, I just can't do that. I just can't, this doesn't work for our plan, so we're just not even going to bother. So yeah, that, you know, they're discouraging the development themselves with their own bureaucracy. The research also shows that NIMBY opposition to multifamily development adds an average of 5.6% in total costs and delays delivery of new units by an average of 7.4 months. So yeah, if the neighborhood doesn't want the multifamily property in there, well, that's going to add a little over 5.5% to the cost and delay the property by 7.4 months. Okay, this is huge when we're talking about these developments cost, you know, tens of millions of dollars to build. But once again, that goes back to when you go right up here and it says that 48% of developers avoid even building in that, you know, inclusionary zoning areas. Okay, so yeah, I mean, half of all developers are like, nope, it's not worth the trouble. While most Americans agree that we need more housing and more housing affordable to middle-income households, too many change their opinion when someone proposes to put that housing in their neighborhood. The intensity of opposition is escalated if that housing is rental housing, the report notes. The trade associations ultimately conclude that when development costs rise, so do rents. Multifamily developers cannot secure financing to build their projects unless they can demonstrate to lenders that the rents will be sufficient to cover costs and pay off the loans, they write. The purpose of this report is not to argue that all regulation is bad and should be eliminated, but that some of these regulations are likely duplicative as multiple levels of government impose regulations on the same project. In addition, many of these regulations do not have a relationship to resident safety or building integrity. And that last paragraph right there, that says so much, okay? I've made so many videos about that very topic right there. How so many of the regulations, they don't have any relationship to safety or building integrity, okay? How, you know, a lot of the rules and regulations that are being put in place by, you know, the local municipality, well, they already have a state law that says the exact same or something very similar, and they're putting something in place that's even more restrictive than the state law. So you have to jump through all the hoops for the state, you got to jump through all the hoops for the county, you got to jump through all the hoops for the city, you know, and don't forget the feds. I mean, by the time you've jumped through all these different hoops, you know, you're left confused. And then they say, hey, well, these guys, they're the bad guys, you know, they should have known that this law was in place. they can't possibly, you know how hard it is to keep track of all of the new laws, all of the new rules. It is ridiculous. And they mandate all of this stuff for the developers, for the real estate investors, and for the landlords to do without thinking of the cost that it will create for those people. Okay, and that is why housing costs so much. And until they figure that out, the affordable housing crisis is just going to continue. Okay. But anyway, I'm going to now be going into a comment from one of the people who left a comment on my video. And she left a comment on my video: to punish corporate landlords, tenant advocates want laws that will hurt all landlords. Okay, so let's get right into it. Her name is Chaz Garza, and she says, there should be a limit you can buy. Trust me, you are far from a mega landlord. You are only 4 houses in. You are not on their level. Calm down. You seem to have forgotten that you can lose everything in the blink of an eye. So I be concerned of the way you get greedy and have a lack of compassion for others. So Chaz Garza appears to say that, hey, there should be a limit to how many properties a landlord can buy. Well, listen, I disagree, okay? I disagree for a multitude of reasons. One, you are putting limits on landlords. You don't put limits on any other business. Like when you go out here and you say, well, McDonald's, there should be a limit to the number of stores McDonald's can open. Oh, no, there should be a limit to the number of Starbucks that there are out there. There should be a limit to the number of grocery stores that this grocery store chain can open. No. Okay, it is a business just like any other business. And if you expand your business to the point where you're very large and you have hundreds or thousands of properties, there's nothing wrong with that, okay? You're just on a big level. My issue has always been that when you create these laws and rules, etc., and you're trying to target, you're like, I'm going to make this law and it's going to target these big landlords, okay? So we're going to put this rent control law so these big landlords can't just shoot the rents up, right? Well, the problem is the rent control law impacts all landlords, including the guy with one single family house, including the guy who has just one bedroom in his house that he's renting out. Or in my case, a small landlord. You say I just have 4 houses. Yeah, I actually have 5 houses and 4 duplexes. Okay, so I have a little bit more than 4 houses. I'm not a small guy, and I'm still expanding my portfolio as time goes by. So, you putting a limit on, my growth potential, etc. Being a good landlord, I'm out here, I'm providing affordable housing to people who need it. I'm keeping my properties up. I'm treating my tenants with respect. And you want to put a limit on me because of what? Because you're afraid that maybe I'll turn bad or something? No. Okay? No, I disagree completely with it, right? And no, I'm not on their level yet. Okay? But maybe one day I will be. You don't know where I'm going to be 20 years from now, okay? I don't know where I'm going to be 20 years from now. I might stop where I'm at right now, or I might, shoot up and be, owning 1,000 units at some point. I've met landlords, individual landlords such as myself, who own hundreds of units, okay? Who own, hundreds of houses. And they started off just like I did, with just one home. And then they just slowly expanded and they got bigger and bigger. And now they have large companies that they own, and it surprises me that people are so against people who start their own business and they provide a service to other people that is needed. Okay. Why are you so against this, business owners who are trying to provide a service to people who want that service? That just blows my mind. And you say, I seem to have forgotten that I can lose everything in the blink of an eye. And I have a lack of compassion for others, okay? You think that I forget that I could lose everything in the blink of an eye? For the people who know my story, I darn near did lose everything after the 2008 recession, okay? Darn near lost everything, okay? I had no job. I had no money. I was in ungodly amounts of debt. And I crawled my way back. I paid all my debts off. I took a job I didn't want, working at a prison. That was the only job I could get, okay? Working in the middle of the night with murderers and rapists and horrible people. And I worked all the overtime I could to try to pay off my debts, okay, and get back on my feet. And fortunately, I can't forget that, okay? I can't. I know what it takes in order to get ahead in life, okay? It takes hard work, it takes discipline, and it takes personal responsibility, okay? And I used all of those things to get started in real estate investing and build this nice small business that I have going right now. So it bothers me when people like you, Chaz Garza, start talking mess about what I'm doing. So I hope that answers your question.